Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm going to hand you over to my chaplain, Kate, who's going to say a few words for us. Kate.
Thank you. Well, what could I talk about tonight but football? I think that the moment England went from mildly optimistic to World Cup-tastic was when England beat Colombia on penalties. Its coming home became a national mantra. But my favourite image of that match was when lovely Gareth Southgate was comforting a distraught Colombian player who'd missed his penalty. They were deadly rivals, but in that moment they were fellow footballers. Jesus tells a story of a Good Samaritan. A Jew was beaten up, left for dead, and respectable members of his community walked on by. Meanwhile, a Samaritan, someone totally different in terms of religion, culture and politics, a different team, a rival, helps him in his hour of need. Their shared humanity is more important than the things that divide them. So in this chamber, I'm sure there will be robust debate and contested decisions. That's how democracy works. But remember the things that you have in common and support one another as you work for the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth. So let us pray. Loving God, we pray for this evening's meeting. We pray for wisdom, and we pray you will guide good decisions that benefit this whole community. For we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you. Can we all be seated? Right, so I'll just go through the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Please exit by the door by which you entered the room, or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure that your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. Apologies. Has there any apologies received? Okay, no apologies. Just make a little note about filming. Filming tonight's meeting will be filmed for publication on the Council's website. All members are reminded that they must turn their microphones on before beginning to speak. The cameras will only point to the member when the microphone is on. Can I also suggest members fully extend the microphone so that their speeches can be properly recorded? A microphone will be provided for use by members of the public who have notified that they wish to ask a question or make a statement. The minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of May. Can I have somebody agree that they are approved as a true record, accurate to the proceedings? Right, okay then, Councillor, would you like to explain that?
Mr. Minutes. It simply says that the minutes of the meeting were confirmed and signed by the Mayor. It doesn't mention the fact that the accuracy of those minutes was queried by Councillor Wilson here, and that his request to have those previous minutes amended was denied. I feel that the minutes of the meeting should state that the accuracy of the previous minutes was actually queried.
That we don't do that. So, apart from that objection, can I have somebody accept that they're true minutes? Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackson. Okay, because of what's been said, I'm going to need to take a vote on the minutes. So can I have a meeting, can I have a vote for the minutes and a vote against the minutes. So we'll start on a vote against the minutes. Okay, so that's 17 against, and we've noted in the minutes, Keith, that you wanted it recorded. All those for?
It's published on the website that I work that relate to Parliament.
Councillor.
Little Chamberlain School Foundation.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, announcements. I have a couple of announcements. One of them is from myself about a mayor's appeal which is taking place on the 4th of August called the It's a Knockout. It's taking place at Stockford Sports and Social. If anybody wants to get a team together, please let me know and I'll get you a registration form. Or if anybody wants to sponsor me, then I'd appreciate that as well. And I've got sponsors for me here, as it happens. So thank you. I've got another announcement by two councillors over here, so I'll take the first one as it is. Bill.
You certainly know that once you become the mayor of Nuneaton and Bedworth, it's a real honour to do that, and I was privileged to do that last year for the second time. You'll also be aware that it tends to be a tradition that the outgoing mayor puts a piece of silver into the parlour for the silver collection. I've done that, quite a bit of planning to it, so what I'd like to do is actually just bring it down the front for tonight, for you to take into the parlour tonight. Because I'm also aware, although quite a lot of groups visit the parlour and see the silver, there's some councillors that don't get into the parlour and have yet to see the silver. So if you'll allow me to, Mr Mayor, I'd like to present you with this piece of silver for the civic collection. Fundraising activity was to do a wing walk, so I've kind of adopted that for the piece of silver, and because my daughter does it as well, and she's been knocked off the plinth, I'm on the top of the plane and she's just stood at the side. Thank you very much.
I've got another announcement from Councillor Longden.
Some people might think this is a bit too far in front, but the logistics of it are quite enormous. Can I announce, Mr Chair, that on the 9th of June 1919, that's a Sunday, the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers will exercise their freedom to march through Nuneaton, with bayonets fixed and drums blaring and flags flying, and all the pomp and ceremony that goes with that. In addition, you might be aware that it's the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings. So we're going to combine that with it. And it also hoped that we'll hold Armed Forces Day on the same day. So that's a big thing for the borough. And there's lots of people who want to take part. There'll be some stepping stones along the way. I'm hoping to get all the bricks in place for another meeting, possibly in February, where we start putting the detail to it. It's got the potential to be a fantastic family day out for all the residents of the borough and further afield. So I hope everybody will support that and you now know what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Longden. moving on. Public participation. I've got three questions, and we'll start with the first question, which is from Michelle Condacott.
Thank you. The food festival in Nuneaton Town Centre on Sunday was an excellent event. I was, however, disappointed to see bins overflowing in many places around the town centre, including on Queen's Road itself, right outside the Roadwalk shopping centre, and that was at the beginning of the event, not at the end. This rather let the image of the town down. I've noticed a lot of overflowing bins in all areas in recent times. I realise that some bins are emptied by the council itself and some by Glendale, so I don't know who was responsible in this case. Would the portfolio holder ensure that, when future contracts or schedules are arranged, they are more reactive so that more frequent collections are made when demand is high, such as when events are happening, or we have a spell of good weather, which means people spend more time outdoors? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Councillor Jackson, do you wish to say anything by way of reply?
Wonderful for your question. This was the first time Nuneaton held a food festival in the heart of the town centre, and the event was run by CJ's Events with the support of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council's events team. The event increased footfall figures against the previous Sunday by 44%, but maybe 43%, but well over 40%, equating to an additional 4,000 visitors. Cover had been arranged by our events team to monitor and empty the bins throughout the day. Unfortunately, the cover did not materialise on the day due to sickness, and as such, bins did overflow. The events team did their best to react to the situation by emptying bins as best they could and providing bin bags. We will be meeting with the organisers this week to review the event and look at opportunities to repeat it in the future. This review will focus on how we improve arrangements and, of course, will look to address the issues experienced with the bins this year. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the second question. I'd like to invite Owen Reid to ask the question, please. Okay, third question then. Now, I'm hoping I'm going to be forgiven for this. I'd like to ask Lubs Kavikovic.
I think we'll stick with Lubs, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I've seen firsthand the issues that all parts of the borough have experienced with Glendale and the fact that they are not delivering the services for which they have been contracted. As a resident of the Bulkington ward, I would like to ask the portfolio holder for an update on the curbside recycle collection tender, which is due to start later this year.
Okay, thank you for the question. Councillor Shepherd, do you wish to say anything by way of reply?
Approval has been given for a service level agreement to be established to allow Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council to enter into a 7-year shared service agreement with Coventry City Council for the curbside recycling collection of dried recycling materials from October 2018 onwards. Officers from both councils are working on the details of this. In terms of the contract for sorting and reprocessing the materials that are collected from the curbside, the procurement process for this will be concluded by the end of this month. Thank you for your question.
Okay then, moving on. We're on to number 8, questions by members. Right, I've had notice of 20 questions from members, so there'll be no supplementaries. And if we do not get through all the questions, all the questions will be answered within a week. So every question will be answered within a week. And we'll start with the first question. I would like to invite Councillor Evans to ask his question, please.
In May, myself and Councillor Gran attended the George Eliot Tour, which was hosted by members of the George Eliot Fellowship. I was amazed by just how many people came to the event, including 2 people from London, 1 person from Italy and 1 person from the States. With the George Eliot link, Nuneaton Bedworth has so much potential to capitalise on tourism, something that I feel this council doesn't really do a lot of. So could I ask the Deputy Leader what preparations the council have got in place to celebrate the bicentenary of George Eliot next year in 2019?
Councillor Lloyd, will you reply?
The council, along with Nuneaton Museum and Art Gallery, is working with a range of partners to deliver the following projects and more for the bicentenary year and beyond. Branding of the town centre, focusing on the connection with George Eliot, to be launched in 2019, creating a sense of identity and pride to the town. George Eliot quotation trail, signage, positioning in the locations throughout the town, giving examples of George Eliot quotes such as "Never judge a book by its cover." Aim to raise the profile of George Eliot, encouraging visitors to movement around the town centre. George Eliot Legacy event to celebrate the bicentenary of 2019 and will then take place each year on an ongoing visitor attraction and create a sense of pride and heritage within the borough. The museum was recently successful in being given a grant of £119,711 from the Fabian Collection Fund. The 18-month project will incorporate work on the 3 internationally important collections relating to George Eliot and the people of Nuneaton and Coventry who influenced her. They are held by the Nuneaton Museum, Warwickshire Libraries, Nuneaton and the Herbert Art Gallery and Museum in Coventry. The museum is working to secure funding for 2 special temporary exhibits aimed at attracting new visitors to the borough next year, April to July and October to December. The bicentenary, I can't say that word, so I ain't going to. The group are including the museum and George Eliot Fellowship is also meeting, and discussions are ongoing for the possible events for next year, with some due to be announced very soon.
To invite Councillor Gassain to ask his question.
Question is also for the portfolio holder for arts, leisure and economic development. Sorry, I took myself back in. Right, following the recent and ongoing complaints about the council's grounds maintenance contract and the promise that Glendale are going to pull their socks up, it's clear to see they've not done that. They're struggling to cope with the workload. They're just behind, and we're getting complaints all the time. So, with the contract due for renewal next year, what steps will the council be taking to improve the outline requirements for tender? And what measures will be put in place to make sure we do get a better service once the new contract comes into force?
Lloyd, will you reply?
Yeah, the contract was first awarded nearly 10 years ago, achieving an instant savings of £400,000. Further reductions to the cost of the contract have been achieved over the year and the contract life of over £500,000 in order to obviously balance the council's budget. In reality, due to government spending reductions, the grounds maintenance budget has had to be reduced year on year by 58% between 2010 and current day. The contractor is currently performing 79% against its 75% target. The proposed specification and conditions of the new contract obviously cannot be disclosed as it's for commercial reasons, but the authority is shortly to sort the tendering process to begin in late 2018 in readiness for the new contract to start in November 2019. The specifications will address some of the key issues identified in the current arrangements, principally the effects obviously of the weather, the growing seasons, etc. The priorities identified by our customers, the public, for example, grass cutting in the cemeteries and parks. The criteria will include for a mix of requirements weighted accordingly, i.e. For starters, the actual fines that are dished out to Glendale will come at a very early process rather than late in the process. And finally, to complete the report on the new contract, we'll be giving it to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to completely go through it. So it is, we have took action. I've met Glendale myself as well, on 2 occasions now, and hopefully the new contract will enable us to keep on top of everything. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Portfolio holder, I would like to move a motion in accordance with the Constitution that this council believes that the Glendale contractor should be focused on the core areas of the specification rather than teaching residents to maintain open spaces which are currently already in the remit of Glendale to maintain. I understand in moving this motion that the portfolio holder and the leader have had some discussions with Glendale. However, many of us across the borough, and I have received representations from residents in Nuneaton and Bedworth, have expressed concerns to me about the sorry state of affairs across Nuneaton, Bedworth and indeed Bulkington, as Lubbs from the gallery mentioned earlier. This simply is not good enough. We have not experienced what we are paying for. We are paying for a service and we have not been getting it. The statistics which have been provided by the officers to all members of the council show that, and this is subject to update, I agree and appreciate, but during the recent crisis we've been experiencing with Glendale, no rectification notices or penalty clauses have actually been issued. That may be subject to change because we haven't had the most recent figures provided by the officers at this stage. As I drive around the borough, there have been some improvements, but not up to the standard which residents expect. At the time we had this highlighted, the portfolio holder gave a statement on Facebook stating that the portfolio was not, that the contract was not meeting its requirements, and yet we are now told by the portfolio holder in his reply that we are up to 79% in appreciation ratings. If that is the level which is being written into a specification, that is a very poor response, actually, to expect 75% to come back, and I would hope that the portfolio holder will look at improving that. But also, for the portfolio holder to stand there and say that the specification and the contract will be before the internal overview and scrutiny panel is quite frankly laughable. Because given the recent changes which have been imposed on this council by the party opposite in relation to scrutiny, we will not be able to fulfil that function without doing what the Conservative Party did at the last internal overview and scrutiny panel, and that is to requisition another overview and scrutiny panel to do it. So if you want us to do the job, then you have to give us the facilities to do so. You have said you will make savings in the budget by scrapping 2 panels. You're still not going to be on course for those savings because we've already had to requisition 1. Odds are that there will have to be more requisitioned, and if we do as the portfolio holder is saying in his reply, we'll have to do even more. And I think it is quite frankly contemptible from the party opposite to try and camouflage the crisis we are currently experiencing by saying we'll get Glendale to teach the residents how to maintain the borders and open spaces and flower beds within the borough. That's Glendale's job, not the residents of this borough. If residents of this borough want to do it as kind and community-minded activities, that's all well and good. But trying to deflect the issue is not good enough, and that's why we've moved this motion, Chair.
I'd like to second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Well, thanks for that, but you have to wait for me to ask if anybody's going to second it. So, has that got a seconder?
Thank you. Proposed by Councillor Wilson, and I would like to reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Lloyd, would you like to reply?
Oh. Where do I start on this? For starters, I'll start on the rectification notices. The rectification notices are served on Glendale. They then have around about 10 days to actually comply with that rectification notice before it becomes a default notice if they've dealt with it. Unfortunately, what you end up with this contract is you get a lot of rectification notices in, so Glendale then run around doing all the rectification notices and leave the rest of the contract because they don't want to get the default notice. On the new contract that we are going through now, we've changed that, And instead of having the default, at the default stage, they get charged for not doing the job. They get charged straight from the start. On the reported issues, at the end of the day, you know, it was such a burning, I said it in the press statement, it was such a burning issue that there was very few members that had actually reported any issues. And some of the ones that are doing the complaining over there hadn't reported any. They may well have took my advice now and started reporting the issues. On the Facebook statement that I put on Facebook, I didn't relate at all to the 75%. The 75% is in the contract. It's been in the contract since 2010. I suggest you ask Councillor Damien Brown, because he was around at that time and he was part of the authority that actually took the contract from our own workforce and put it onto Glendale by saving, what was that I said earlier, £400,000 on the 60% reduction. We've had 60% reduction in budget over the last few years from your government. It does take its time, and it does put pressure on the services, and that's what's happening here. The Borough in Bloom. I'll touch on the Borough in Bloom. Of course they don't want the Borough in Bloom. They don't want no good ideas. They want to poo-poo everything. I went to a business sector meeting the other week. Their MP was there. Yes, he did look a bit red-faced, because I suppose what he thought was going to happen was the businesses were going to say, no way, we're not doing that. I had 5 businesses come straight up to me straight after that meeting and say, we'd love to take part in this. We want to be a part of it. We want to talk this borough up, not talk it down. Their words, not mine. We want to talk the borough up. We want to help put more flourage and more stuff into the town centres. So, and you need to get with it and listen to the public, because that's what they've asked for.
Thank you. Councillor Concourt.
RB Glendale caused me lots of work. If things go quiet and then you have a busy year again with Glendale causing you lots of work. And one thing that worried me about what Councillor Lloyd said was the specification has to be confidential, and I think the specification should be totally public. The actual commercial amount of how much you pay may be confidential, but if we actually had a public specification and actually look going forward when we talk about what we're going to do in terms of scrutiny, let's make a public document that everyone can see what the specification is, so that we actually get a lot better self-enforcement, because then people know. I mean, there's not a lot of money around, so we're not going to have a Rolls-Royce contract, but at least people will know and be able to discuss what they're getting, and the areas that we need to set aside for wildlife and the less we can cut, we at least know that is in the specification. And one thing I must pick up on, this 60% cut is actually the government's grants. We get lots of other income, and a successful town is actually raising income from business rates and other sources of income. So the council's funding hasn't been cut by 60%. It has been changed and cut significantly, but this 60% is not the cut. And we need to think forward. Let's forget the past and work out a public contract and get the best for this borough.
Dark just said, at the stage of scrutiny, majority of that will be in the public domain. Obviously, there's some parts of it that has to be in pink paper, because obviously it will give other people that are going to apply for the contract, or people that are going to apply for the contract, different opportunities. So we need to be very, very careful.
Got 2 more speakers. Richard.
Back, the portfolio holder in his response just stated that Glendale spends so much of their time reacting to rectification notices that they don't complete the contract. Well, my point is, if they did it right in the first place, they wouldn't need to go back and rectify poor work. I'm not sure how he can defend their poor service in this way.
Okay, thank you. Aidan.
The party opposite want to hold Glendale to a 75% target. We on this side will hold them to a 100% target, as our residents rightly expect. We have had a huge of
Point of order
complaints.
again, Aidan.
There's some that side that initially put the contract in. That's why it's 75%. Talk to Councillor Brown.
Perhaps if you actually listened and thought contract, if they were unhappy with it, they could have created a new one rather than rolling over and continuing extensions. The reality is we have had a deluge of complaints. We as councillors have received a deluge of complaints, and yet the portfolio holder has had 2 meetings with Glendale. Well, I hope the public are watching this, because they will not be happy to see two meetings from the portfolio holder with the people that are not performing when they are asking them to, and when their residents are paying to. Now, the portfolio holder also talks about moving on to scrutiny. Again, I echo Councillor Wilson's points. Give us the tools to do scrutiny properly. I know they don't like scrutiny, but give us the tools if you're going to refer things to it. I also think that the new specification I'd like to see shared with members immediately. If he wants to quote about these figures and extra things and way the new specification is going to be, brilliant. Share it with pink paper with members straight away. I'd also say, final point, he says that there are issues and there are issues here. Well, let's look at Hinckley, there are no issues. Let's look at Solihull, there are no issues. Shall we spot the theme? North Warwickshire, there are no issues. Shall we spot the theme? They're Conservative run, they're properly managed, and they are well resourced, and they are well spent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. I have several more speakers now. Councillor Graham next.
Councillor Walmsley will talk to me. We enjoy talking to each other, and sometimes we even have a laugh. But what isn't a laughing matter is what's been happening recently in the borough with the grass cutting. And I think it's a bit baffling that you want him to talk to me about a decision that was made before I was old enough to vote. And also, I thought you said Gran. But, yeah, I thought you said Gran. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, carrying on. If the decision made to give Glendale the contract in the first place was such a terrible decision, then why haven't they reversed that in the last 8 years? I know that you say when you look at the different tenders that it doesn't have the name on, but it doesn't take Colombo to figure out that Glendale's always the cheapest, but not necessarily the best. And another thing that I think that we need to be taking account of is all these Labour people saying, well, maybe if the government was giving us more money, they could do more. Well, I don't understand the logic of this. If you pay somebody to do a job and they're not doing it right, then, you know, I don't know why it's logical to start giving them even more money to do even more wrong. You know, make sure that they're spending the money that they're being given by this authority from the taxpayers correctly before you decide to give them even more. So, you know, we're putting all our eggs in one basket with Glendale. I'm glad that other options and amendments to the contract are being looked at, but, you know, the proof is in the action, and so far we've had no evidence of improving what's happening in this borough with Glendale.
For that, unfortunately, run out of time to speak on the motion, so the other speakers that was listed no longer have time to speak. Sorry, but that's the rules. So now it's over to Councillor Wilson for right to reply.
The defence from the portfolio holder was very interesting. He says that he wants to talk the borough up. It's the Labour Party which have run the borough down. He wants to listen to the public. He wants us to listen to the public. We listen to the public. We got 51% of the vote at the last election. They got an absolute hammering and slaughtering at the ballot box. So we'll see who's listening to the public. It's us, as opposed to the controlling group. They talk about the extension of the tender and how it was put out in 2010. Councillor Brown was indeed around. I was around in 2010. The difference was that we had, courtesy of the Labour government at the time, a £1.5 million black hole in the council's budget, and the then Conservative administration had to make savings too. Surprise, surprise, we're in the same position. You have to make savings. It's a fact of life. But the difference is you opposed making those savings at the time. You took back control in 2010, and you were quite happy to bleat on at the time when you had a call in about how things will be bad in Riversley Park. Actually, it wasn't the council's contractors at the time maintaining Riversley Park, it was Glendale maintaining Riversley Park, so you shot yourselves in the foot with that argument. But when you took back control, you didn't bring it back in-house. You were quite happy to accept the savings, and yet you sit here with a view that you can just get away with being misleading to the residents of this borough. You've had the opportunity, since you've been back in control for 8 years, to actually look at the issue of the tender and the whole specification. Instead of putting it back out to tender again and seeing if we're still getting the best deal, what did the controlling group do? They bumped the three contracts back together into alignment and extended the contracts. If anyone is to blame for the current position, it is the party over there, because they have allowed this position to continue. This isn't about giving anyone more money. This is about making sure that the money we currently give is being spent and spent wisely and doing the job that residents rightly expect it is paid to do. And on all fronts, on every single measure, the portfolio holder over there has failed. And that is why we should be making sure that Glendale stick to the specification and do the contract, not bolting on additional pressures. The portfolio holder spoke about pressures on Glendale. They're adding to it by expecting them to teach residents to do their own gardens. That isn't actually helping the situation. That's deflecting the issue. So on every measure, they have failed. And this motion says we should look at putting it right and letting Glendale get on with the job and doing their job and doing the issues which residents want to be done, which is cutting the grass, trimming the trees, not teaching people how to plant bulbs and how to mow the lawn. That's not what residents pay for. They pay for the service to be done for them. So I want to call for a recorded vote on this, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So, going for a recorded vote on the motion.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Can you read the motion out, please?
Okay, the motion is: this council believes that the Glendale contractor should be focused on the core areas of the specification rather than teaching residents to maintain open spaces which are supposedly already in the remit of Glendale to maintain. Right, so all those in favour of the motion? Oh, actually, no, it's recorded vote, so we'll go into that. So,
Okay.
over to you.
Okay. Right. Councillor Beaumont.
I'm against it.
Councillor Brinley-Edwards. Councillor Brown. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doughty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox.
Against, and I don't know where the core areas are.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacore. Councillor Llewellyn Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Pandir. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor Andy Sargent. Councillor Jane Sargent. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins. And Councillor Wilson. Okay. 17-17. Motion is lost.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is lost. Okay, so moving on with the questions, I would like to invite Councillor Walmsley to ask his question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The 2nd of July, refuse bin. The 29th of June, recycling. 22nd of June, green bin. 21st of June, green bin. 20th of June, refuse bin. 18th of June, refuse bin. 8th of June, refuse bin. 8th of June, green bin. 25th of May, refuse bin. 23rd of May, refuse bin. 22nd of May, refuse bin. 16th of May, green bin. 15th of May, refuse bin. 14th of May, refuse bin. 11th of May, green bin. 10th of May, green bin. Blythe Close, Heath. Calendar Close, Weddington. Smithfield Place, Abbey, the portfolio holds own ward. Gold Close, Attleborough. Hathaway Drive, Whitestone. Kipling Close, Galley Common. Cedar Road, Camp Hill. Waterlily Way, Arbury. And Armson Road, Exhall. This list represents just a few of the roads that have been missed and delayed green and refuse bin collections since 10th of May 2018. It's also worth noting that the length of this list is nowhere near as long as the list the council used to publish online of roads that had been missed each day. Can the portfolio holder therefore confirm whether she briefed Councillor Jackson before her interview on BBC Radio Coventry in Warwickshire on Monday the 2nd of July, and who is responsible for the inaccurate remarks she made during it when she claimed the issue of missed and delayed bin collections was confined to a single street in Bedworth? Thank you.
Reply.
Councillor Walmsley, I can confirm that the leader of the council was briefed by officers rather than myself in relation to the specific locations prior to a radio interview on BBC Coventry and Warwickshire. Unfortunately, I was unavailable. While unfortunately a limited number of properties have experienced issues with their collections over the last few weeks, the vast majority of households in the borough have had their bins collected on schedule. I'm sure that the councillors are aware of how hard our refuse operatives work in sometimes difficult circumstances, and they always try their utmost to provide the best service for our residents.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'd like, Mr Mayor, I would like to move a motion which is as follows. The Council calls on the portfolio holder for Central Services and Refuse to stand up at this meeting and apologise to the residents of this borough for the well-documented issues and failures to collect and empty bins.
Get a seconder for that.
I'm reserved the right to speak, thanks.
For that. Okay. That's seconder. Keith. Councillor Walmsley. Okay, we did have a seconder for that, but it hasn't been debated, so we're going to debate the motion first. So,
Mr Mayor, point of order. I'd like within the Constitution that if a member moves such a thing, then there's no debate takes place and the vote is taken on move to the vote.
There's a minute.
Members on this side of the chamber when motions are moved to enter into any sort of informed debate and we haven't seen the motion so put. So could we ask for a copy of the motion or that it be read out to us?
Okay, I'll read the motion again. The Council calls on the portfolio holder for Central Services and Refuse to stand up at this meeting and apologise to residents of this borough for the well-documented issues and failures to collect their bins. Right, okay, so it hasn't been talked about, so we'll go into, so Councillor Walmsley first.
Glad that we can have this debate, even if it's surprising the Green Weddington councillor, whose ward's had issues, as well he will know as I, doesn't want to have debate on this subject. Let us be clear, it's quite interesting actually that the portfolio holder says it's a small, time-limited, a number of properties. The irony is that after I'd submitted my question, the actual authority on its own Twitter, Facebook and website warned residents there are issues all week with collections this week and probably into next. I find it somewhat ironic, very clearly, that the previously we had listed the bins and the streets that were missed. Evidently the list was becoming so long that it wasn't able to be displayed on the Twitter and Facebook on the website, and that suddenly stopped after approximately a dozen or so missed collections and delayed collections. I think it's well documented. My list is a very, very short list compared to those number of streets that have actually had their missed collections, some of which have had no collections for multiple weeks, and that is further than one single Blythe Close in Bulkington. The portfolio holder needs to get a grip and
Hold on, can you take a seat a minute? Point of order.
Close is not in Bulkington. I can take him to show him exactly where it is if you would like me.
Point of order. Councillor Walmsley, have you finished? Okay, can you carry on?
Shut down debate on this, don't they, as always? The residents are clearly upset. The documents are very well valued, they're very well noted. The councillor portfolio holder should stand up at this meeting, do the decent thing, apologise to residents and give us an explanation on how we're going to get it back into making sure the bins are collected regularly, on time, as scheduled, going forwards. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Again, just to remind you, you've got 15 minutes. Next one up is Councillor Wilson.
Elton John used to say sorry seems to be the hardest word to say. What this motion is asking the portfolio holder to do is actually hold her hands up on behalf of the controlling group and apologise to residents who are not getting the service they pay for through their council tax. This isn't a one-off issue. This has been a sustained, prolonged period of failure within the department. Now, I have seen discussions on social media about how individual operators have been targeted and abused by residents. That is clearly unacceptable, and everyone on all sides will condemn such actions if that is going on. That shouldn't happen. The issue is, though, that there is a failure further on up the management chain which must stop at the portfolio holder and the leader's doors. They are in control, allegedly, so they must take responsibility for what is going on in this authority. It's taking upwards of 19 days to get a response to a complaint about having bins emptied. Every single overview and scrutiny panel we used to have, until you cut it, used to raise issues about complaints. And yet we still can't get a grip on saying to residents, sorry. Fortunately, I emailed an officer who is actually in the room tonight, and he instructed the authority to say sorry. But the buck stops with the political leadership. If an officer can say sorry, why can't the portfolio holder? That's all we're asking for. All we want is for residents to get the service they pay for and deserve. You have clearly failed to acknowledge that this is a wider issue than just Blythe Close in Bedworth. It's happening all over the place. And certain residents, and I've had this in my email box, are actually starting to feel victimised by this council because they think that if they haven't had their bin collected once, then twice and sometimes 3 times, somehow because they've raised a complaint which still hasn't been answered, that they're being targeted. Now that's not me saying that, that's a resident crying to me on the phone because she thinks she's been victimised and left out on her street. Now that's not right. And she's emailed me and begged me to try and sort this out. And eventually we've seemed to have got somewhere. But that's not what this council should be doing. It's shameful that this is what is resulting from this council. And the leader and the portfolio holder should just simply say, I'm sorry, we want to get this right. They won't even tell the residents that part of the problem is because they haven't ordered the wagons on time. I had to go and find that out from officers myself. If you'd have put that up to residents on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, they might not have been happy, but they might have at least had an explanation as to what's going wrong. Get a grip. You might have lost outright power, but you're still exercising the wheels of control. Do it properly.
Councillor Longden.
Thank you, Mr. Cynical mob you are. Councillor Walmsley is a god. He knows everything there is to know about grass, bins, everything else. Knows nothing.
Wait a minute.
What? Sorry.
Right. We are going to run things through the chair. I realise I'm not going to have an easy year, but we are going to run things through the chair, and we are going to be respectful around here. So let's just carry on with the meeting. Let's get the meeting done. Councillor Longden.
And I'm not prepared to do that because I'm not going to take it off them. If they can't take it, they shouldn't give it out, and they're doing it all the time. This is just a cynical attempt to get an apology by some way, shape or form, so they can go on Facebook and say what heroes they are, look how incompetent the Labour group is at running this council. That's what the issue is here. It's nothing to do with apologies. Now, you don't know what goes on in the bins. There are problems. There are problems with residents. Residents don't present their bins. Then they complain it hasn't been collected. There are problems with drivers and drivers' hours because of traffic jams and goodness knows what. There's all sorts of problems that goes on in the bins. So check your facts. And the book doesn't necessarily stop here all the time. It's out there where the problems are, getting to the people and getting the bins emptied. I know I had a winter of discontent, didn't